chair. So with that comes the honour of chairing this inaugural meeting until such stage that we get to appoint a new chair and deputy chair. But before we start the meeting, just one little announcement, and that is your mics, for those who aren't aware of this chamber, lovely chamber that it is. The right-hand button is your talk button, so press that just before you talk, and then obviously turn it off after you've finished. But Julian, I might turn to you and ask for the karakia, please.
Whakatokataho ki te uru, whakatokataho ki te tonga, kia mākina kina te uta, kia mā taratara ke tai. E ia ke ana te atakura, he teo, he hoka, he hohu, ti he Māori ora.
Thank you very much, Julian. I'll now ask for apologies. Are there any apologies today? There being none, we'll move on to item number 3, confirmation of the agenda. I do have a couple of minor changes. So our intention is to change item 5, the confirmation of the minutes, to come after the existing item 7. And for item 11, the group recovery and manager policy to come up straight after the confirmation of the minutes. And that's just to allow officers to present who need to be elsewhere. So other than that, the agenda is presented. Are there any questions about the agenda order? Everybody's happy with that? Cool. Moving on to item number 4, disclosures of... Oh, we do need a mover and seconder. So can I have a mover for that, please? Moved and seconded. Thank you very much. And moving on to item number 4, disclosures of interest. Are there any interest to disclose for today's meeting, please? There being none, we don't need a mover and seconder for that. So item number 6, adoption of standing orders, and Neville, hand over to you.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair, and tēnā koutou katoa, councillors and members of the Joint Committee. I'm Neville Williams. I'm a director here at the Regional Council, and the democracy process is one of the sections within the directorate I'm responsible for. So this is processes around adopting standing orders for this committee. You'll see from the report, which I'll take as read, that we have been previously operating under a set of standing orders since May 2003 that are no longer fit for purpose for the reasons that are articulated in the report. What's being proposed here today is that we adopt the standing orders that have been in place with the Regional Council. They are attached as an appendice, as you'll see. They're fairly substantial, and you will no doubt be familiar with how these things work from your previous roles. And so it's proposed that these be adopted accordingly. Section 19 of the Civil Defence Emergency Management Act requires a vote of no less than 3/4 of the members present at this meeting to confirm that the acceptance and adoption of the proposed terms of reference and standing orders. So that is what's being proposed at this point in the meeting, and will enable you to go forward with a fair sense of confidence that you've got good structure and operating processes in place. Kia koe.
Just a question to you, Neville. We actually in the reference documents we've not put in the 202 Civil Defence Act, which is actually referred to on page 35 of standing orders. So it actually carries on with the standover or carry on of the during the triennium, this committee. So you do actually state that it's in the, as I say, in the Civil Defence Act 202. Just whether we actually have that as a reference document.
Yes.
It's on page 35 if you want to.
Yes, I see where you're coming from. So I guess the question is do you wish to have the Civil Defence Emergency Management Act attached as an appendice? Was that the question? Or
that is the question, just whether we have it as a reference document actually in there so that it is referenced.
It's not, as you can see in the report at the moment, the Act itself, but we can attach it at a later point if that's acceptable, and it can be made available to members who wish to have a copy of the Act. It's probably easier in an electronic version. It is easily obtainable through the New Zealand Government online services, and we can provide you with that link should any member require it. And those of you who require a hard copy, if you can just give us a little bit of prior notice, we can arrange for that to be printed and made available to you as well. My understanding is that the Act is under review at the moment, and I'm not sure exactly of the timeline, but I expect it's in the next 12 months. We'd expect to see a final version. I guess once it gets, I suppose it has to go through a royal assent process, and that Act will supersede the one that's currently in force. But if that's acceptable to members, we would happily send out a link to that piece of legislation. And for those of you who require hard copies, if you could let our Democracy Services team know directly, we'll arrange for publishing of that copy accordingly.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Neville? There being none, we do have 2 recommendations there. The report standing orders is received, and that the Waikato Civil Defence Emergency Management Joint Committee adopts the current Waikato Regional Council standing orders as amended. Do we have a mover for that? A seconder. Thank you. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you very much. Okay, so the next, who was the seconder, sorry? Moving on to the next item, which is the exciting one, election of chair and deputy chair. Neville.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the report you'll see is on page 95 of your agenda. Most of you will also be familiar with this process as we are following the process that's prescribed by the Local Government Act. So there are a couple of considerations. First and foremost, one is around the adoption of the system, which is systems A or B, which I'll talk about in a moment. And then the next one is adoption of a method for an event of a tie for selection. So we'll start first with sections methods A and B, systems A and B. You'll see the detail between those on page 96 of your agenda under section 6 options and analysis. System A allows for progressive voting, requiring election by a majority of voters present, and with the person receiving the lowest vote. So this is on the premise that more than one person is nominated for either the role of chair or deputy chair. So we'll start with the chair and then you move to the deputy chair role. If more than one person is nominated, then you would apply either System A or System B to that determination and selection process. So System A allows for progressive voting, and the person with the lowest vote, if there's obviously more than 2, is excluded, and then the votes are run again, and then out of the person scoring the highest vote is then appointed. In the event of a tie, should there be 2 candidates and there's a tie, then a decision is made either by the drawing of the name from a hat or the tossing of a coin. Both of those choices need to be determined as well before we start this process. So what happens in the event of a tie? System B is a more straightforward process, I suppose, without putting any bias on it, but it does say that basically whoever receives the highest vote in the first round is appointed. Again, if a tie occurs, then the tiebreaker is determined by the toss of a coin or the drawing of a name from a hat. There's only one round of voting in System B, whereas System A requires potentially multiple rounds of voting, dependent upon how many nominations are put forward for either the chair or the deputy chair roles. So that's sort of the summarisation, I guess, of the process that we're now about to go through. Obviously, a very important, critical process, and at the conclusion of this step, then Gareth would rescind the chair and pass it over to the appointed chair, who would then convene the meeting from that point forward. So the recommendations are there in the box, as you can see in the report, and there's a few blanks to fill in there. And section 2 of the recommendation that's asking for you to first determine which method you're going to use. So there'll be a process in place now to do that, and then the next choice will be the method selected for the tiebreaker should that eventuate. Subject to any questions or clarification, I'd hand back to the chair to go through the process of the adoption of the system or the decision around the system.
Mr. Chair, can I just get clarification whether I'm allowed to vote? Because I'm not here and on the alternative, so.
Yes,
Thank
yes, you can. Neville, are we best to step through and do each recommendation individually, mover and a seconder for each one?
Yes.
Any questions for Neville before we do that? Okay, so Julian's just mentioned to me there's a couple of people here who have a primary and an alternate around the table. So just clarifying that only one primary if in the seat, that would be correct, Neville?
That's correct. Only one is here to vote, can vote, yes.
Again, any other questions of Neville before we put the recommendations? There being none, we'll do the easy one first. Number 1, that the report be received. We've got a mover. Right, a seconder. Thank you. Okay, on to the second resolution there, the system to be used. The system A or system B? Have a mover for either of those, please. System B? Mover for system B. Second is there. Okay, all those in favour for system B? Against? Carried. Thank you. Then number 3, in the event of a tie, the selection will be done by way of either a toss of a coin or a selection out of a hat. Have I got a mover for a method there, please? And which method? Toss of a coin? Okay. Have I got a seconder for the toss of the coin option? Seconded. Okay, all those in favour? Anyone against? Therefore carried. Thank you very much. Okay, on to the fun one. And it is my intention to exit the chair as soon as we appoint the chairperson, who will then do the deputy chairperson election. So number 4, do I have any nominations, please, for the chair of the Waikato Civil Defence?
Chair, I'd like to nominate Anna Park, Councillor Anna Park from Te Apo for the chair.
Moved and seconded. Are there any other nominations? There being none, we'll put that to the vote. All those in favour of Councillor Park being the chair? Against? Carried. Thank you very much. Now I will exit the chair just for a second and we're going to have a quick break after. Do you want to do that before the deputy or should we do the deputy now? Chair first. Okay, so we'll have a 5-minute recess if we can, people, just so we can move the room and then we'll go on to the deputy after that.
Thank you, everybody, for the vote of confidence. Kia ora, welcome to the inaugural meeting of the Waikato Joint Committee for Civil Defence and Emergency Management. We'll just tidy up this resolution and then I'd just like to take a short time to go around the room and for everyone to introduce themselves. And can I please acknowledge the Regional Council Chair, Pamela, who's here with us today. So the fifth part of the staff recommendation is an election of a deputy chair for the joint committee. So can I ask for nominations, please? Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Thomas. Are there any other nominations? Okay, all those in favour of Councillor Lou Brown Waipa being deputy chair? Against? Carried. Congratulations, Lou, and I look forward to working with you. If I can start with Councillor Lee, if we can just go around the room, introduce returning member, new, congratulations. We've got some new your worships at the table, which is fantastic, and lovely to see you back, Jackie. So if we could just informally do this first.
Kia ora koutou, Thomas Lee Aho, South Waikato District Council. This is my fourth term on council and my fourth term as a joint committee member. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas.
Kia ora, Russell Smith, Matamata Pauko District Council. This is my second term on this committee. The first one was only half a term, so it's a term and a half.
Morena, Enid Williams, fourth term councillor, first term deputy mayor. I think this is my fourth term on on the joint committee, but it's certainly my third anyway.
Good morning, everybody. John Grant from Thames Coromandel. My first term as a councillor, and I'm here as a alternate today for our new mayor as well, Len Salt.
Morena tatai, ko Kendi Nataki Ahau. I'm a new councillor for Waikato District Council, and I'm here with me, Jackie, today as well. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Kia ora tātou, ko Jackie Church, toko ingoa, so Mayor of Waikato District Council.
Welcome back, Jackie, and congratulations.
Nice to be here.
Morena, Mikael Downard, first term Waikato Regional Councillor from representing beautiful Taupo and Rotorua regions. So I'm the alternative to Councillor Tipa Mahuta.
Kia ora tātou, ko Len Sol toko ingoa. I'm newly elected Mayor of Thames Coromandel District Council. Learning as I go, but I'm pleased to be here. Thank you, everyone.
Kia ora tātou, ko Emma Pike toko ingoa, and I'm here from the Hamilton City Council as a first term councillor.
Alan Goddard, this is my fifth term on Waitomo District Council, now Deputy Mayor, and I think I'm not sure if it's the fourth term on this committee.
Good morning, everybody. Philip Buckthorpe from Karakia District Council. This is my third term as a councillor and third term on the joint committee.
Hello, everyone. My name's Lou Brown and I represent Waipa District Council, and this is my second term civil defence.
Thank you, Lou. Without the wonderful support of staff, we wouldn't be here doing the great job that we're able to do. So can I start with Julian, and just if the staff could introduce themselves and let us know the function that you have within the emergency management group would be great.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Julian Snowball toko ingoa. I'm the group manager, group controller for the Waikato Civil Defence Group. I've been in this role for the last 4 years, and I look forward to working with you on this triennium. Kia ora.
Oh, everyone speak, Gareth. Yes.
Kia ora everyone, I am Jess. I am one of the democracy advisors here at the Waikato Regional Council, and civil defence is one of the joint committees in my portfolio, so you'll get familiar with me for a while.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Dave. I'm one of the democracy advisors here at Regional Council, and I'm second support to Jess for this portfolio, and I've been here about 18 months, and nice to see you all.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Aaron Tregarth. I'm the team leader for operational readiness at the Waikato CDM Group.
Morena Irving Young, team lead community resilience and recovery.
Morning, everyone. Anisha McPhee, Acting Resilience Manager at Waikato District Council, and I'm here today supporting Mayor Jackie and Councillor Nat.
Kia ora tātou, ko Todd Miller tōku ingoa. I'm here representing the National Emergency Management Agency as your focal REMA.
And then the two lovely ladies down the back, Jill and Vicky.
Vicky Tokuingwa, and I have been at the NEMA office in the role of Strategic Planning Advisor for 5 months. Relatively new. Thank you.
Great, thank you, everybody. There'll be time at the end of the meeting if people are intrigued by others to have a chat. So what we'll do is we'll move back to the beginning of the agenda with confirmation of the minutes, and that is from the meeting on the 29th of August 2022. So preferably a mover and a seconder who were in attendance, please. Thank you. Thank you. So that is Karakia and Waipa. Thank you very much. All those in favour? Against? Carried. And now, if I've got my direction correct, we're moving on to the Group Recovery Manager Policy, which is agenda item number 11. Hi, Irving.
Recovery policy is item 11 on the agenda and move forward. So the purpose of this is to provide the Joint Committee with an update on the recovery policy and seek decision and adoption of the recovery policy. The executive summary is developed to confirm the appointment structure and financial arrangements for the Waikato CDM Group. And then we require 3 recommendations on this. One is to accept the report, receive the report, accept the financial delegations, and the third one is to adopt the recovery manager's policy. I'm just quickly going to go through some background points. The purpose of this policy is for to appoint suitable and trained qualified recovery managers, and that the policy is also applicable to local authorities, and people that are appointed in those roles are suitably qualified and experienced. And then the other part of this policy is that there is no consistent financial delegations in this previous policy, and this one actually bring the consistency of financial delegations into the document. It's acknowledged that the financial impact on local councils will be big during the recovery, and that's why this is actually in this document. Then also, it's important to note that this document is focused on the transition period only. It doesn't focus beyond the transition period of recovery. So it's just that Section 94 of the CDM Act with the transition powers that the controllers got, it doesn't impact on beyond that when people want to rebuild the town or the city. The preferred option is to recommend the Joint Committee receive the report and adopt the proposed policy, and to provide appropriate financial delegations to recovery managers. Thank you. Thank you.
Are there any questions or points of clarity for Irving? So happy to take the item as read. There are 3 parts to this recommendation. Is everyone happy for me to take them all as in one motion? Great. So number 1 is that the report recovery manager policy to the Waikato Civil Defence Emergency Management Group Joint Committee 12 December 22 be received, and 2, that the Joint Committee notes the inclusion of the financial delegations within the Recovery Manager Policy. And 3, the Joint Committee adopts the Recovery Manager Policy. Sorry, Monday morning. Can I have a mover and a seconder for that? Thank you, Annette and Thomas. All those in favour? Against? Carried. But we're now going to move to the meeting schedule on page 121. This is pretty short and sweet technical item. Are there any staff that wish to speak to it, or anybody who has any questions? There being none, the staff recommendation that the report meeting schedule 2023, which is about the 4 meeting dates in the executive summary, be received. Moved by Jackie, seconded by Russell. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. We'll now move to the original number 9, which is the opportunity to appoint Iwi Māori representatives. Oh, Julian, sorry.
Sorry, I'll talk to that one, Madam Chair. So this report is to provide you with an opportunity to consider a proposal that we've received from the Regional Council regarding Māori representation on your joint committee. So a brief background to this: there is a national review of the Civil Defence Emergency Management Act underway. That's expected, when it is complete, to enable Māori representation on civil defence emergency management groups. It's currently not as full voted members. The legislation doesn't enable that, but that legislation is not likely to change until late 2023. So the Waikato Regional Council has 2 Māori constituency elected members that collectively provide for Iwi Māori representation across the Waikato region. And this offer of assistance to have those advisors, or those constituency elected members as advisors to this committee, will provide support until the new legislation is passed, and or whichever comes first, a more permanent structure is implemented in the Waikato Civil Defence Group. So the appointment of the advisors is compliant with the Civil Defence Act. Whilst it's very clear, the Act is very clear that there can only be 1 member per council, which is a voting member. You do have terms of reference. It's silent on advisors, and you do have terms of reference that enable advisors to be co-opted, non-voting, onto the committee. The offer of this assistance is really timely. We are currently going through a review, or shortly going to be going through a review of our CDEM group plan. That group plan is our corporate plan, in essence, for the next 5 years. It sets out the vision and the priorities for the 5 years ahead. So to wait until the legislation's passed and then seek a resolution for Māori representation on the committee will come after we've had to sort out our vision and our priorities and our strategy. So having that involvement now would be very useful to us, to you as a group. Just some more background in terms of, I said, whichever comes first, whether it is the legislation that enables representation, or whether it is our more permanent structure. You have, or this group has previously passed a resolution to explore representation of Māori at all points of the regional emergency management system, and work is progressing in that space as we speak. So we could end up with a resolution regarding what representation looks like for you as a committee before the legislation passes. So it's whichever comes first.
Councillor Dowdard.
Madam Chairman, and that is why we, as Waikato Regional Council, appointed Councillor Tipa Mahuta with the mana that she holds to be on this committee.
Thank you. Any other questions or points you'd like to raise? Okay, so there are 2 parts to the staff recommendation. I'll take it all as one, and that the report opportunity to appoint Iwi Māori representatives for the Waikato Civil Defence Emergency Management Group Joint Committee 12 December 22 be received. And 2, that the Waikato Civil Defence Emergency Management Group Joint Committee formally accept the offer from Waikato Regional Council to co-opt the Ngā Hau e Whā and Ngā Tai Kia Uta constituency councillor as advisors to the Joint Committee to represent Iwi Māori across the region, recognising that any one of those members may be appointed to the Joint Committee as Waikato Regional Councillor member. And as the Chair, I'm selfishly going to move that. And thank you, Deputy Chair Blue, for seconding that. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. So now we'll move on to item 10, which is on page 125, government reforms. Thank you, Vicky.
Sorry, apologies for that. Okay, so this is, I mean, we're all well aware of the plethora of government reforms that are going through, and previously Becca had done a review for us and identified the key ones that may have impact on emergency management, and there were 5 that were given high priority. So at the moment, there are 3 which are coming up, or the bills are out, or the submission period's open basically, with the Natural and Built Environment Bill and the Spatial Planning Bill. Their submission period now closes the 30th of January, and the review into the future for local government, the submission period closes the 28th of January. So to make a submission to that, what we're looking to do is, we'd previously brought to the Joint Committee a proposed structure, and they asked that it come to this first meeting of the new Joint Committee so that we had a variety. So we were asking for, sorry, excuse me, the old croaky throat, a member from a large rural area, large urban area, city area, and with coastal, and with a maximum of 4. So that was the structure we were looking at putting in place without discussing people individually first. And if you were acceptable to pass that resolution, and then actually today the need to appoint members, name members to that group, obviously with the tight time frame of getting those submissions in. And that's probably about the gist of it, if anyone's got any queries.
Julian?
Just one from myself, Madam Chair, given that the previous resolution, so that was adopted, that proposal was put forward by the previous joint committee prior to the inclusion of Māori advisors on, so you may wish to structure of.
Thank you, Julian. Considering that this is a sort of 4 formal meetings a year, I can say from past experience that the subgroup is a great way to go, because it just means we can move more agile and be more flexible. I think that including a Māori representative is a really good idea. And before it was large rural, large urban, coastal, as Vicky alluded to, in the chair or the deputy. So does anyone have any opinion around this? Yes, so that being a subgroup, I don't think we need to have half of the committee on it, but anyone that has a specific interest.
No, you're looking
Mayor
at me,
Soft?
Madam Chair. As a coastal community, which is often vulnerable to civil defence events, it feels like we should be part of that. I'm just a bit concerned that both Councillor Grant and myself are very new, and it's a very, very tight time frame between now and the end of January. I'm just not convinced that we're in a position to contribute much of value. What I might ask is your permission to maybe get a comment from Councillor Grant, if that's all right with you.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Mayor Len. I understand those comments and support that, but I also think that it's extremely important that there is a representative of a coastal community, and for that reason, I would certainly be willing to put myself forward. I do have a lot of experience in it, so would be happy to contribute in any way that I can. That was seen to be appropriate.
And I would support that. So.
Thank you, Mayor Lynn. Mayor Jackie.
Yes, I would be interested in being involved in that if possible. I think one of the latest actually erosion events actually happened at Te Pua Waikato, and we lost, car park was lost a week and a half ago. So in terms of that coastal erosion, but for a large rural area in the centre, if that's appropriate, we would be happy to be involved and have capacity in January.
That's great. I'm just really conscious of the fact that neither Māori representative is at the table, and I wouldn't like to speak on their behalf. But Councillor Candy, do you have any guidance for us, perhaps?
Kia ora. In regards to that, I suppose I'd be supporting Whai Jackie on that as alternative, and I'm happy to give guidance around that for our table here, or for our forum. So, kia ora.
Thank you.
Just for the benefit of this, Councillor Ngātaki is a chair of the Huakina Trust, which represents 34 marae in the North Waikato area. So it's well capable of helping with, I think, with the work that we need to do. And they're also making sure that we talk to the right people, at least in that area, in that rohi.
Thank you. Therefore, so what about rural? Do we have a rural councillor who would be keen to be part of that subcommittee? Councillor Brown?
Thank you very much, through your chair. We actually are also in civil defence actually tied with Otaronga and Tomo. So we do cover quite a vast area. So perhaps it would be best that we are included as well.
So Councillor Goddard and Williams, between the three of you, would there be a representative for rural? Who might that be? Yourself? Okay. So if we, for large urban with Māori interest being the worship Jackie with support of great, like coastal. John, you're quite happy to fulfill that? I'm being very inconsistent with my term titles. Great. And then as chair, I'm happy to sit on that as well. So that would be a subgroup of myself as chair, Councillor John Grant. Large urban would be Her Worship Jackie Church with very capable assistance of Councillor Ngātaki, and then Councillor Lou Brown for rural. Any further comment to that? Great. So, sorry, yes.
Just a comment, Mr. Chair.
It's right. You can call me Mister.
I'm used to Hugh being there. Sorry, Anna.
I think I've got a little bit more.
Just through the chair, yeah. Look, I was just going to comment that I've been involved with the adaptation planning for the Wharekau Coast 2120. So if there was a section there that you needed assistance with regarding that, I'm happy to be involved as well.
Absolutely, Councillor Buckthorpe. So can we just add Councillor Buckthorpe to the group, please? Thank you. So the submission subgroup staff recommendation is in 4 parts. I'll take it all as one if everyone's comfortable with that. Part 1, that the government reform submission subgroup for the Waikato Civil Defence Emergency Management Group Joint Committee be received, and 2, that the Waikato Civil Defence Emergency Management Group Joint Committee approve the recommended submission subgroup structure, and 3, the Waikato Civil Defence Emergency Management Group Joint Committee confirm members Councillor Park, Councillor Grant, Councillor Brown, Mayor Church, Councillor Buckthorpe of the submission subgroup, and of course with Councillor Ngātaki as support. And 4, that the Waikato Civil Defence Emergency Management Group Joint Committee give delegation to approve final submission content to the submission subgroup members. Just before I move, ask for a mover and a seconder on that, the submission will be flicked around all members before being submitted to, or we'll flick the final submissions around, because there's no point in having a subgroup otherwise, is there?
Yes, that's fine.
Great. Can I mover and a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Goddard and Mayor Salt. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Next, we move on to item 12, the group work plan and COVID after action report on page 138. Thank you, Julian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This should be a brief report. This is to provide yourselves with a high-level assurance reporting on the status of the priority actions identified from our current operative group plan and the COVID after action report, which provided us with another action plan back in 2020. So what you'll see here is, for those that have been on the joint committee the previous trienniums, the detail has changed a bit. We've tried to give you a level of reporting that is more relevant to governance rather than getting into the operational level reporting that's provided to the coordinating executive group. This is our first try of that, and for those members who have been around before, you may have some commentary on it in terms of whether it's too high or just right, and we're happy to go back and certainly provide you something that meets your needs. At this moment in time, what this report is telling you is that the work plan is made up of priority issues. There are some items in the group work plan that were, if you want, shelved and approved by yourselves because either A, future government or current government reforms would make the work in that space redundant in a very short period of time, or we needed to prioritize stuff because of the diversion of resources into COVID. So we deprioritized and reprioritized issues. All of the stuff that was prioritized by yourselves and KEG is on track to be met. Happy to take any feedback on the level of the reporting for your needs. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Julian. Does any returning members have any comment on the new reporting? Councillor Brown.
Thank you through your chair. I just think this is great. I think it's a lot tidier. It's a lot easier to read, and we're not getting into the the actual maintenance of everything and also the operational levels. Seeing things as a governance level. I think that's great.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. I'd like to concur with your comments. I was pleasantly surprised reading through the agenda. It's good, and we're allowing staff to get on with their jobs rather than writing reports, which, like you say, in Topol we say noses in, fingers out, and I think that it's quite apt for this as well. Are there any other comments? That being said, the staff recommendation is that the report group work plan and COVID after action report prioritised goals, Waikato Civil Defence Emergency Management Group Joint Committee, 12 December 2022, be received. Thank you, Councillor Brown. Can I have a seconder for that? Oh, thank you, Thomas. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Right, item 13, New Zealand Response Team Waikato NZRT6 update. Thank you, Julian.
So this is for information, really from an information and a reputational perspective, so you understand the context behind it. But there may be some very minor reputational questions asked, but you'll get a flavour for it. This is to provide you with an update on the status of NZRTs across the New Zealand response teams across the Waikato region. So the National Emergency Management Agency have published some guidelines which describe the requirements for New Zealand response teams. One of those requirements, which is very explicit, that hasn't been there before, is that KEG, your executive group, are required to approve the accreditation of all NZRTs within our region. We've only ever had one in this region, that was New Zealand Response Team 6, and that was established many years ago and was owned by, in essence, the parent organisation was Topol District Council. Under the new guidelines, there are a lot of requirements for a a team to go through to be accredited, even existing teams. And on this occasion, because of a bigger piece of work that we're going to do, Taupo District Council has decided that it is not going to seek re-accreditation at this stage for NZRT6. What we are doing as a group is we recognise that actually having one New Zealand response team or in a geographic area the size of the Waikato region is actually quite low when you compare us to other similar groups such as Canterbury. So when we're looking at our gap analysis, where do we need do we need New Zealand response teams? What do we want them to do? And where are our gaps? We're actually combining that work with the Bay of Plenty. And at the moment, the Bay of Plenty have got 3 New Zealand response teams, one of them being in Rotorua. So you can see the geographic connectivity and closeness of Taupo and Rotorua, and you question why you would have those resources so close together when we've got nothing over on the west coast, Bokau up to Port Wellington, for example. So we're doing a joint needs assessment with the emergency services and a gap analysis across the Waikato and the Bay of Plenty Civil Defence Group to identify any efficiencies and establish what function we want NZRTs to undertake, because under the new guidelines there's a core function, then there are additional functions which are more specialist. So what do we want them to undertake? And the line for that very much is there a gap in the emergency management system that would benefit from this team, or is it already catered for under the core emergency management system such as fire, police, Red Cross, etc. And then once we've done that, we'll identify where we're going to recommend to you any of those new groups are located. So the risk is, of course, that the reputational risk that I talked about at the beginning, that we are removing, or it would appear on paper that we are disestablishing our only NZRT. That is just the small part of the picture that I've just now painted for you. And just to give you some context, there are more New Zealand response teams being signed on at the moment across the country than there are reduced. So we're not taking away from national capacity. And our on a very selfish point of view, the NZRT6 that was housed in Taupo was never deployed in Taupo as an NZRT. It was always deployed elsewhere, many to other civil defence groups. Only once within our area, that was up in Thames Coromandel, Councillor Grant. So that was back in 2018. Not getting rid of it, we're just looking at the function, and before we start looking at and we'll come back with some options to you.
I've got a couple of questions myself, but is there anybody who would like to speak to this, or is there any questions? Mayor Salt?
Just some clarification, please, because I'm new, and I'm assuming that was a flood event in 2018.
The January 2018 storm surge, the perfect storm surge, so it was Kaiawa and the west coast of the peninsula.
Remember it, thank you. And that's the only time that was ever deployed, that NZRT 6?
Within, certainly within the Waikato that I'm aware of. I swear it was deployed to Ruapehu, I think it was deployed to Christchurch.
Okay. Thank you.
Just probably might be either Julian or Gareth, with not re-registering the response team, does that mean it dissolves immediately, or is there a transition between not re-registering and the end of the current registration?
So you would not be, if it's not registered by the end of this month, end of December, as a badged New Zealand response team, which has accredited, for want of a better phrase, by civil defence or associated with civil defence, it's dissolved.
So it's basically like a warrant to, yeah.
The only thing I'd add there, Madam Chair, is that we've obviously been working with the members of that response team, and each of those members are also members of other associated and accredited industries. So mountain response or FENS volunteers. So they are going to be still part of the system, just not run under that response team banner.
Thank you, Gareth. That was my next question, is just about communication and the people, because we don't want to lose that volunteer base, but it's good to know.
Sorry, Madam
Yes.
I'm sure it's in hand anyway, but it would be very appropriate, I think, for the civil defence group, because it's a civil, been owned by Taupo, but ultimately it's been a resource for the group. And when those final chapter is closed, given the Kaikoura, the Christchurch, the Ruapehu, Firth of Thames, I think it would be appropriate to have some form of recognition from myself and the joint committee.
Correct. Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing as you're mentioning that, and I'm not quite sure a letter cuts it. So we'll have a think about that because, yeah, volunteers are really appreciated, and it's great that they're deployed in other areas because when the rubber hits the road, our people are the most important thing. So, is everyone comfortable with that, Philip?
Madam Chair, I got it right this time. Just a comment, really. It's a similar situation to what happened with St. John a few years ago, where a lot of volunteers to stay in the organisation had to become accredited and go through a whole process and rigmarole. And we lost a lot of really good people as a result. And I wouldn't want to see the same thing happen. Keep them in the loop.
Absolutely, totally agree. Anyone else? Okay, the staff recommendation is that the report New Zealand response team be received. Can I have a mover and a seconder for that, please? Thank you, Councillor Buckthorpe and Councillor Williams. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Right, Todd, can I invite you to come forward for the NEMA update, please?
Morena, thank you, Madam Chair. So first of all, the report has been issued and is included in your documentation. However, I'd like to bring to your attention the timeline for the submission of the bill into the House. Minister McAnulty has now confirmed that the bill will not be submitted to the House until early 23 due to conflicting timeframes. In addition to that, the review of the National Emergency Management Plan, which is associated to the bill, has a extended timeline due to the adaptation to catastrophic planning that's been undertaken by NEMA. So NEMA has recognised there is a need to push through workshops and some collective planning towards a catastrophic event, and that has sucked up some of our resource. So the timeline for the plan, which has been workshopped through the catastrophic planning, will be pushed sideways slightly. No confirmation is yet on the timeline for that. The Monitoring, Alerting and Reporting Centre, which is NEMA's 24/7 monitoring, alerting, reporting system, is now live. That has has replaced the duty system that we have historically had within NEMA and has gone live since the 5th of December. So they are the first point of recognition of any nationally significant events, and this won't change how groups report or engage with NEMA through the REMAs. We will still have REMAs on duty covering both north and south. However, the MAR will be there to facilitate the awareness of events. Foot and mouth disease planning is still ongoing, and that is still being led by MPI. NEMA is engaged with that at the all of government hui and will continue to be so. Anything that comes out of that will be linked directly through to the group manager. Kia ora, thank you.
Todd, any questions for Todd? Yes, Mayor Salt.
Madam Chair, thank you. Todd, you're going to have to forgive me if this is outside of the scope of what you're presenting, but a big question that keeps coming up in our district is the threat of tsunamis and the use of tsunami sirens. We now have a situation where there's a lot of background work being done on this. We haven't, as a council, made any decisions on what to do about reinstatement of tsunami sirens, but it's a very hot topic of discussion. We've reached a point where there's a possibility of community funding for tsunami sirens. The big question is going to be the triggering and management of those sirens. Is there any part of the work that you're doing that would cover that? And is that something that is appropriate to be looking at and discussing?
Part of NEMA's work plan is in the tsunami space and the support of the local and regional engagement of tsunami warnings using the emergency management alerting system. However, I will defer to Julian on the specifics around tsunami sirens from a local and regional perspective.
So I've got your question. Apologies if I've not understood this correctly. If you're looking, as TCDC is looking at the reinstigation of sirens, then there's nothing preventing that within legislation or the guidelines or any resolution that I'm aware of that's been passed through here. The only resolution that came through this committee was that any sirens that, so if I go back some time, there were a number of sirens at TCDC and there was most of them. There were a handful, less than a handful of sirens elsewhere. The resolution of this committee or the previous committee was that any sirens had to comply with the standard. That's the only resolution. So there is nothing that says you cannot have sirens. In terms of the monitoring and the trigger is I think was the other part of your question. Well, the group plan is very clear. The responsibility for local alerting sits. So if you were going to instigate a siren, you have to have the capacity to capability in-house to be able to activate or respond, make sure the community were aware of what that siren meant. Because again, if I go back, the sirens are, unless they've got a voiceover that says this is tsunami, they are normally meant to seek further information. So you would have the infrastructure or the structure in place to act alongside that. So of course, at a regional level, we have duty officers that we would be able to support in some way around that, but the prima facie, the primary responsible local report sits with the local authority. We would be the backup if you want. That if, for whatever reason, your primary structures, because of a major earthquake, and that's what they weren't able to do something around pushing out local alerting, and your infrastructure was down, then we would be able to act as a backup. It's very much a decision. Crowd or source funding, community funding, I'm not aware of anything that would prevent that from.
Thank you. Again, through the chair, that is very helpful. Thank you. So assuming that we have the ability to put something in place locally, is there a pathway to work together to coordinate the triggering and the alerting, or is that entirely on our shoulders?
In the first instance, that would be a local. We would certainly support you, but that would be in terms of creating the infrastructure and creating the process. We could certainly work with you on that, but the act is very clear. If you go back to the act is very clear that the responsibility for providing emergency management sits with it, and I think it sits with the district. This would fall in that. We as a group have clarified that in the group plan as well. We would certainly work with you if that was your direction of travel, but in the first instance, I suppose that they would jumping across to the side. We operate DCDC at this moment in time. We operate duty officer. So your staff don't. The local one, we support staff are not every week.
Thank
support
you.
that remotely. We would be able to support that as long as we would continue to support that, and we may therefore, but as long as we were satisfied that what you put in place was.
Thank you. And I apologise if I've gone off topic. If we can establish some communication, take this offline, that would be really helpful to us. Thank you for that.
Absolutely, and no, I
Appreciate
don't
it.
think it's off topic at all, and it's useful information sharing. For
It is
everybody.
for us. It's
Yeah.
a real hot
Yeah,
topic.
I've got no problem with that whatsoever.
Thank you. It's great. Thank you.
Councillor Brown?
Yeah, but just a quick question, Todd. I was actually wondering whether we're going to get, as a joint committee, a little bit more information on the CAT plan and how it's being developed, because I think this is quite a significant, enterprise. And as a joint committee, I think just how it'll affect us and what that will actually do.
Yeah, most definitely. And thank you for your question. So the catastrophic planning work cycle has been implemented through our Chief Executive, Dave Gawn. He's recognised through conversations with other governmental agencies that New Zealand, Aotearoa, is not quite at the level of preparedness relative to the risk. So from that, there's been the first workshop sprint. It's being termed as a sprint to identify the risks, challenges, and the national level all of government plan for a hikarangi subduction zone event. And subsequently, the next event will be an AF8 event that they're going to be planning for in the first to second quarter of next year. Once the all of government plan reaches the 60 to 80% completion, which is what they're hoping in the next month to 2 months, then we're going to be seeing that titrate down to intra-regional planning and then down to the region and the local. So we're seeing a top-down, but the engagement from bottom up as well. So attendance to that first workshop, we had group manager attendance from some groups in order to provide that regional lens to the planning cycle. I don't have specific timeframes for you, but we will see these plans be disseminated out to groups.
Julian?
So just to build on that and maybe give you some assurance, Councillor, the Waikato Civil Defence Group were not part of, and neither were other groups such as Auckland. We weren't part of some work that was done about 6 years ago now, which was the East Coast Labs. And I'm looking at Todd as if he'd know, but he's only been there recently. The East Coast Labs with Tairāwhiti, it was Wellington, it was Hawke's Bay, I think and it may have been Bay of Plenty, did a lot of modelling around impacts and consequences of a rupture of the Hikarangi subduction zone. Auckland and the Waikato and others were not involved in that work. So what we are now doing is we are currently undertaking some research to understand we know what the tsunami consequences will be in models around that for Thames Coromandel, for example, on our east coast. Don't have is the shaking. So we are at the moment undertaking some work to understand the seismic risk and what that means our region. And then we'll get that by, the timeline for that is June this year, where we'll have the foundation work for that. And then from July 2023, we will be doing all the consequence modelling using the foundation work that we're doing. So that's based on, if you remember, there's been a change to the national seismic hazard risk as well, and that takes into account, I think, and this triggers to why NEMA are doing catastrophic planning and prioritising that. When GNS Science are saying it's the rupture of the Hikarangi subduction zone is the largest seismic threat that they are aware of at the moment to New Zealand, and there is something like a 25% chance in the next 50 years there will be a rupture on the Hikarangi subduction zone. That's from GNS Science. So that's why we're building on that modelling, and we will have something, certainly consequence modelling starting in July. All the groundwork is being done now.
And I recall some work through GNS and maybe MB around the shaking, because there was some subsequence to Taupo being possible IL6 builds. So yeah, there is some initial work there. And considering living on the rim of a super volcano, and as Gareth alluded to before, we've been the most recent recipients of a tsunami and a bit of shaking, would be interested, definitely. Are there any more questions for Todd? Jackie?
The questions actually. The national plan, so while that's been progressed, I guess when I read this, I see a lot of words like with evaluating. I don't see timelines. So while this is happening, then what do we do? And then what do our teams do? And over what time? So I around, I guess, the reporting, be a bit more, so that gives us a bit more timelines for. And then yeah, so what are we doing?
Kia ora, Jackie. Thank you for your question. So trifecta is the bill, the plan, and the National Disaster Resilience Strategy, which that is currently on hold, the strategy. The bill, we're waiting for ministerial approval to get it into the House. The plan, we had definite timeframes with that. However, that has now changed due to planning and also the bill introduction into the House. NEMA has been engaging on a monthly cycle with the group managers, providing continuous updates as to where pieces of the work are. So the plan is still in progress, but the definitive time frame is yet to be confirmed. And with the limited resource that NEMA has right now, in order to achieve cap planning, the bill and the plan, work is still underway. I can't give you definitive dates at this stage, but the engagement with Waikato Group and all groups is still underway.
I guess it's I apologise that getting my head around the whole thing again is the impact of national plans on our region, but being a really important region, I think it's the most important region. I'd like to have an affirmation of that one, is how do we grow our waka and continue on, and are these things holding us up?
Yourself, Madam Chair. I'm Jackie. So I'll go back to the group plan reporting. So we have an operative group plan at the moment, and I suppose there is some work in that still needs to be completed. They are the priorities that KEG and yourselves have signed off. So we do have a direction of travel, although it is quite a narrow focused direction of travel, and it's very much around it's particularly around the response and recovery side of. So there are some maintenance not issues, but maintenance work that's done around our readiness as well. So there is definitely a direction of travel. There is definitely an action plan that we are working to. I agree with you, though, it is coming to its shelf life, hence it's 5 years, and we can't change that until, well, we could go back in time. We could review that and start setting our own regional direction for the Waka at the moment. The challenge will come that if there's national plan goes in a direction that we're not expecting it to, then we would have evaluation of our group plan. Costs quite a bit of money to do that, takes a lot of engagement. So the resolution of this committee in the previous triennium was to start the work of reviewing the plan by looking at the risk assessment, things like Hikarangi, bits of information around seismic hazard, but stop short of actually undertaking, this is the direction of travel we want to go and get the NEMA document. It's not, we're genuinely not, we're not treading water. There is still room in our group plan to move forward, but I hear your sentiment and I agree. Get the new plan opportunity to move forward.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll try this whole mouthful. Te kautahitanga on tai. Okay, so how are we progressing this in the Waikato? I guess what's our action?
This is the wānanga
Yep.
in September in Wellington.
So we're going in a positive direction. So what's our action plan?
So the first thing that we don't have an action plan in this space. We've got in terms of an operational action, have a strategic plan to try and get the advice that we need around the table, and we also have the members around the table to be able to have a Iwi Māori lens and participation at the review of the next group plan. So everything that we do going forward under the next group plan within the next months will have had Iwi Māori tangata whenua input, the design of the plan. So there's no operational plan unless each council will have its own. There is at operational level, you have a regional Māori engagement framework for your EOC. Each council has different places with that, depending on the complexity rest in your different councils. So yours will be complex given the size of your district and how many iwi rest in the geographical simple in other areas. But there is absolutely a plan that your staff will be looking at to try and develop a relationship at a EOC level in terms of whether whether it's generic across emergency management, whether it's specific to a particular geographical area, or whether it's broken down into specialist bars. That will be down to each of the side what that relationship looks like. Absolutely the work there. That is a priority piece of should be getting developed.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking, at this space where it's the region, the Waikato region, the action plan is not specific, DUI on the floor, but in terms of that overall timing, commitment, something like that. I mean, you say a year, I'd like to see that, but I guess at the next meeting, I'd like to see a bit more specifics around that plan of engagement, if that's what.
So, yeah, one of the items on the next agenda item will be on the meeting. We've got a consultant working on our behalf in relation to what does representation look like when you've got 7 these that would identify as or similar group. Does that look like for this size? What does mandated representation versus how do we get that? That we've got a consultant working on that for us, for you. Peg will be providing you the committee awesome.
Lastly, Madam Chair.
Sure.
So, I'm touching wood here, foot and mouth disease. I see the report here as, I guess my farmers, because we're, over 50% rural ourselves, pretty big area for rural. What's our plans if it happens tomorrow?
So,
like what's, we don't want this to happen, but I guess preparedness is key. And I'd just like to have a bit more confidence. Confidence in your ability, but confidence that there is some things in place that we can press a button tomorrow and things are on way, and that we know who we need to talk to and where and how, and that's going to be pretty quickly operational.
So in relation to that, we've had briefings now, or from PI direct, and just to be really clear, view of PI will be the role of civil defence, emergency legislation point of view envisaged, that will be required at all. So the Biosecurity Act and other legislation provides all the measures that MPI needs. Civil defence and local authorities will be a support to an MPI lead. Now, what that means in terms of being ready, support in terms of where the rubber hits the road. If there was an outbreak in your district tomorrow, and given that it's a large area, there's a high potential of that, then it could be your area. Then the view is MPI would reach out and they would ask us to support them through the provision of potentially ask us to support them through the provision of staff, EOC, and an EOC facility as an interim measure until they have identified their occupation in terms of facilities and they've been able to identify and deploy their own staff. That could be for weeks, if not going into a month or so. The leadership would come from the leadership and function managers definitely come from MPI because they are the specialists in this. They would be SIMS trained, emergency management, capable, competent staff. The work that we're doing in that space is the response framework, is the training for civil defence, it is the stuff that we do as councils day in, day out in terms of making sure your staff are trained, have sufficient people in each of the functions, provide resources to what's called a response framework, which is a regional framework where we test that as the group office on your behalf to make sure there's resilience in the system and enough numbers being trained person. Not wishing to give anybody any dates, but part of that test is going to be in here. There's already scheduled. Push the button and we get the numbers reported through to us in terms of how many people got allocated the response framework and trained. Button in the new year just to see, well, on any given day, how many of them were actually available. So the work in that readiness and preparedness for emergency, same as it is. If it's not an outbreak in your region, neighbouring district, then the impact's a lot less because they will be looking at a facility in the district where the outbreak has been identified. What will happen then is it will be very much a welfare response. Is the civil defence will be a welfare response, that support, and we have what's called a cluster. I know your cluster has MPI and they'll have a P, and that is where the civil defence welfare will be cluster.
Thank you. So obviously, one of the issues, and this was in COVID and whatever, is cross border because we're particularly in our area, and I'm sure there's other areas of where that's a huge effect in terms of. Yeah, they seem to be very concrete. It would be way easier if we used the rohis of Māori, I think, to have a bit more of soft boundaries in terms of our policy making. So I'm just flagging that for MPI if someone's talking to them. Secondly, just on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being mature and ready for action on what I would consider a pandemic style thing in terms of our rural sector. Where's the maturity and capability and readiness of MPI to do a job that's going to be effective?
Garrett, if you'd just like to just tie off this question, then perhaps you two could get together offline.
I think it's a fair question.
And the honest answer is I
certainly.
can't answer for him. I don't know where the maturity is. I've had 3
Have we
briefings.
asked them? Okay, I guess I'd like that understanding from them.
Yeah,
Confidence.
look,
Right.
for the conversation I have had with them, I certainly get the impression that they are working hard on this, and they've been working hard on this for some time. And this isn't something new. They are talking about the likelihood of this happening is still low. The consequences they recognise are really high. I get a sense of, I couldn't give you a number and I wouldn't give you a number, but I certainly don't lose any sleep over the conversations I've had with them.
Right, thank you.
Thanks for that, Todd. Thank you for your patience. The recommendation is that the report, National Emergency Management Agency update, be received. Can I move in a seconder for that, please? Thank you, Councillor Lee and Mayor Jackie. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. We're on to page 148 for the summary of the KEG group. KEG, sorry, there's more acronyms in civil defence and emergency management than there are in any other part of local government. So apologies to our newer members. And there's a really, really good list, like 3-pager, isn't it, of acronyms that might be helpful for the new members, Jess. And it's laminated, so you can't get rid of it very easily. Yeah, so if we can just move on to Keith. Thank you, Gareth.
So I'll jump into this. I think Julian and me just did a rock, paper, scissors and I lost. So I'll take you through this one, but we'll be very quick, mainly because most of the items that we spoke about at the KEG are included in this agenda. So the office location, there's obviously a report that's yet to come. The statutory position, likewise. The KEG terms of reference, it was a very minor change, and it was around the involvement of NEMA in our structure. Health in our structures, so very minor change there. Look, the rest of those items I think I'll probably take as read, because most of them again are involved in this item, in this agenda, and there's nothing really of significance to report back that is additional to the conversations that you're having today.
I always find it really helpful to have a conversation with the chief executive or the appointed manager that represents your council on the KEG before joint committee, to help inform your knowledge around the agenda. So any questions for Gareth or Julian? There being none, the recommendation that the report summary, the coordinated exec group meeting, 11th November 2022 be received. Can I have a mover and a seconder for that, please? Thank you, Councillor Williams and Councillor Pike. Those in favour? Against? Carried. Right, we're now going to have a resolution to exclude the public for the reasons on page 150. Also, with that, there is a second part that the that's particular staff as recorded are included in the publicly excluded session. So can I have a mover and a seconder to move into public excluded? Thank you, Councillor Buckthorpe, Councillor Downard. All those in favour? Against? Right, we'll just take a brief pause just to go offline.